Hey guys, welcome to my channel, The Bird's Nest, where we talk about all things motherhood, freedom, and minimalism. I want to touch base a little bit on my last video where we took a trip to New York with our toddler. The trip had to be cut short because my son developed a fever, and we weren't really expecting him to have a fever, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My son has something called periodic fever syndrome, also known as PFAPA, and when he was about a week old he had a fever. We're not sure if this is related to the periodic fever or not, but he had to go to the hospital and he had to do all those tests, and he was there for a week, and it was absolutely horrible. I'll do another video on what happens when your newborn has a fever, because they take that so seriously. It can be really serious. So he ended up being okay from that, and a few months go by, he's fine. And then a little bit after that, he got a fever. And we were really anxious because this was at the time when COVID was really peaking. And we were really anxious about it because we weren't sure what it was. We weren't sure if it was COVID or something else. Like, obviously we thought he thought his body was fighting something. So, we took care of him. We wore masks. We were very but washing our hands all the time because we were nervous that it was something like COVID, but at the same time we had been quarantining, so it wasn't really adding up, and we were very careful. We did a telehealth appointment with the doctor. They said just keep an eye on it. If nothing crazy happens. The fever went kind of high, 102 point something, I think. And then in a few days it was over. So we thought, okay, we're in the clear. He's okay. He just had a little bug or something. About a month later, he gets another fever. And this time it was he had a helmet at that time to reshape his head, and he had been going to some helmet appointments, and I was like, he definitely picked something up there. The guy wasn't being careful. I was so upset. I felt like he picked something up there. We actually went into the doctor this time. The doctor had a look at him to see, and there was no other symptoms. His throat wasn't red, his lymph nodes weren't swollen. He was perfectly fine, except he had a fever. The fever goes away. Okay. About a month later, he gets another fever, and so on and so forth. The worst one was when the fever went to about 104.5, and at 2 in the morning, we rushed him to the urgent care, the children's urgent care here in our area. And they did a COVID test, and they tested him for stuff, and he had nothing. Again, he had nothing. All he had was a fever. So we spoke to our doctor, and he recommended that we go to a rheumatologist. So we live in the suburbs of a big city, so we had to go into the big city to go see a specialist, and did some tests. Then did more tests. You have to do some tests at a certain time, and then some tests at a different time, some blood tests, and then just with monitoring symptoms and all that stuff. And she decided that he has something called PFAPA, which periodic fever syndrome. So what is periodic fever syndrome? Well, obviously he's getting periodic fevers. They're coming every 3 weeks. That's how often they come for him. So usually periodic fever syndrome starts between 2 to 5 years old, but for towns it started really early, which is unusual. The good news about periodic fever syndrome is that it stops. This is a childhood condition. It's not an adult condition, supposedly. And also, the main issue with this condition is that he gets a fever, so it's not... His heart isn't being affected, his liver is not being affected. All it is extremely uncomfortable for every 3 weeks. And yes, that does suck, but as far as long-term health issues, they're aren't any that we know of right now. Doctors aren't sure where PFAPA originates. Like, is it genetic? Is it environmental? They think it's a combination of both. Or it's just like this freak thing that happens. Who knows? But there's not a ton that doctors know about it. I don't think that they can distinguish a specific gene where it comes from. There are a couple of like periodic fever syndromes that can fall under this periodic fever syndrome, and if Towns starts developing other symptoms like mouth sores or rashes or things like that, then you start looking into other, what could it be? Something else? Could it be something like familial Mediterranean syndrome, which is like another periodic fever syndrome? Could it be something like Behçet's, which is related to that as well? It could be. We don't know yet. We're just playing it by ear. Right now, the doctor's pretty certain that it's just periodic fever syndrome because he hasn't developed any of the other symptoms, and hopefully he won't. But I do believe that some of those others could last a little bit longer, like past childhood. I think they do know that the familial Mediterranean fevers are actually genetic, but for the periodic fever syndromes, they're just not sure. And they're more than not sure, they don't think that it is. But who knows? So what do you do when your child has periodic fever syndrome? The doctor will try a couple of things. At first, while we were just trying to figure out the best course of action for him, Towns was on steroids, and he wasn't on steroids every single day. He was on steroids when the fever would come. So the fever would come, and before it got really, really bad, we would give him the steroids, and then within like 6 hours, the fever would be gone. So the steroids were like really, really a blessing for us, but you don't want your child to be on steroids long term because they can lower your immune system as well as have like other health issues like a very much increased appetite. They can cause some mood changes and stuff like that, sleep disturbances. So it's not like a long-term solution. There are other medicines that you can try. We were put on a medicine called colchicine, and they start you on the littlest dose, and if he's still getting fevers, they up it. So on the smallest dose, his fevers were lower, but you could tell that he was still very, very uncomfortable. Like something was bothering him. But his fevers didn't get up to the 104.5, but he still had a fever. So she doubled it. And right now we are on like day 25, I think, which is the longest that he's gone without the longest stretch that he's gone without a fever since this all started. So we are hoping and praying that the colchicine is working. The only side effect that Towns is having from the colchicine is that he is become intolerant to dairy, so he is on a dairy-free diet, which makes things a little bit more complicated as far as feeding a toddler. Like, they're super picky anyways, so we've had to try to find a lot of dairy-free alternatives, which we kind of like knew a lot about already because we don't eat a lot of dairy at home. We eat a lot of cheese, but other than that, we don't like drink milk. So we already had some options for that stuff. Another thing that they try if your child has PFAPA and the medications are not working is a tonsillectomy. And they don't know why. Like I said, there's not a ton of research on, there's a ton of research, but there's not a lot known about PFAPA. So they don't exactly know why, but a lot of kids who have it and get a tonsillectomy end up making like a full recovery from periodic fever syndrome. Like, it just goes away. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but I think it might be something like half or like 60% or something like that. That's always an option, but at the same time, if it turns out to be something else like the Mediterranean familial or the Behçet's, tonsillectomy won't work. So is that really something that like you want to take the risk of surgery for? That's something to discuss with your doctor and look at your own particular situation if you think that it's worth it or not. You can manage the fevers also with Tylenol and Motrin, kind of like switching off between the two. We found that Motrin always worked a little bit better, but each child is different. Another thing we've been doing a lot of research on is like special diets and if that can help, and we've come across something called the Aip diet, which is the Autoimmune protocol, and this diet is all about not increasing the inflammation inside of your body, which is what PFAPA is. It's an auto-inflammatory disorder. So we've done a lot of research on it. It's a lot easier for adults. For kids, toddlers, they still need very specific nutrients, very specific things that you might not be able to do on the diet. But swapping some things out and putting some things in might not be a bad idea. If it's easy to take out nightshades from your kid's diet, take them out and maybe put something else in, and try things like that. Just, you got to make sure your child's always getting everything he needs. In my next video, I'm going to talk all about the Aip diet, what we've learned about it, and the way that we're going to sort of like incorporate it for our son. And we're hopeful that maybe that at least will help on top of his medicine. Like, he's still going to have his medicine, still going to see the doctor all the time, still going to do everything he needs to do, but we're just hoping that it'll be like that extra boost to help. But so far so good. He's on a long stretch right now, and we're really hopeful that that he won't get a fever. The doctor said that her goal is for him to have 2 to 3 fevers a year that are periodic fever syndrome related. Another issue that we've been having related to the periodic fever syndrome has been our vaccines. So up until he started developing the fevers, he was on schedule for all of his vaccines. But now our doctor has recommended that he be off of the steroids for at least a couple of months before we continue the vaccine regime, because since steroids lower your immune system, and even though the vaccines don't have the live virus in it, he still has seen kids with on steroids who get the vaccines becoming extra sick from the vaccine. He just doesn't want to take that risk, and we've been extra careful anyways because of COVID. We're still being really careful. Yeah, so that's been another kind of hurdle that we're trying to like manage through. So is periodic fever syndrome an autoimmune disorder? The answer is no, it is not an autoimmune disorder. It is more like an auto-inflammatory disorder, inflammation inside. So it more has to do with that than an autoimmune thing. So they're very different things. It's not an autoimmune disorder, but it is an auto-inflammatory disorder. Also, the fevers seem to go on like a schedule, almost like that time of the month when you get your period. It's like on a schedule, almost to the day. And actually for a while there, he was literally getting his fevers on the day I got my period. So it was like it was a stressful time every single month. It is characterized by that you can literally mark it off on a calendar when you think your child's going to get the next fever. That is like a telltale sign of this could be periodic fever syndrome. Another interesting fact about it is that sometimes during the summer months, the periodic fever syndrome can kind of go down. So maybe in July you'll get 1, in August none, in September 2, and then kind of in the winter months it starts going back like on a rhythm. We did not experience this. We actually experienced more fevers in the summer, so that was not true for our case. But our doctor told us that sometimes that happens, and we were really excited like of the fact that, oh, maybe he won't get any fevers this summer. Like, it's very interesting that it could be seasonal, but for us it wasn't true. This last stretch right before she upped his medicine, he had 3 fevers in 3 weeks. It actually was increasing, and it was extremely difficult. Like, this is summertime. This is a very busy time of year for me because I work during the summers. My husband's working. We are the only ones who take care of our son. We don't have like a nanny or anything, so it's just us. And when he gets a fever, especially when it's that high, it's like he needs us. He wants cuddles. He wants to be with us. He just there's no doing anything else. You're not cleaning the house, you're not working, you're not doing anything else, you're just taking care of your child. So when he's having 3 fevers in 1 month, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's really difficult. Like, obviously it's much more difficult on him than it is on us. But it does interfere with life. And I know that it will continue to interfere with life. But we're hoping that there'll be more few and far between so that he won't have a problem with learning and school and all of that stuff, because a lot of children with PFAPA, have to take time off school, and, it can be rough. Thank goodness they outgrow it, though. So if your child has been getting fevers recurrently, like on a schedule, and you think that, oh, maybe he just keeps getting a virus, whatever, but it keeps being on a schedule, and maybe there's not a lot of other symptoms, or maybe there's a rash or something, then call your doctor, tell them it's on a schedule, that's very important, and go see a rheumatologist. I am not a doctor, so don't take what I'm saying as gospel or anything like that. This is just our experience with our son and what the experience has been like for us with periodic fever syndrome. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you want to see more videos like this about PFAPA and the things that we're doing to try to help our son, please comment down below. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.